Usually, a security failure sounds like a brick through a window, right? Like the alarms go off, the logs show this massive, undeniable spike in traffic, and your incident response team just points at a dashboard and says, well, there it is. That's the breach.
Right, yeah. It's that traditional model of intrusion, someone from the outside actively breaking the rules, trying to force their way into a secured perimeter. It's noisy, and more importantly, it's visible.
Yeah, but today we're looking at a landscape where there are no broken windows. The threat environment we're analyzing right now in our sources is entirely built on weaponizing our implicit trust.
Ooh.
So, welcome to Calm Coding, the weekly cybersecurity podcast covering the latest news and stories. Today, our mission is to explore how threat actors are using the very systems you rely on every single day against you.
Exactly.
We're looking at how your trust is being hijacked. And that's whether you're buying tickets to a massive global sporting event or typing your credit card into a seemingly secure checkout page or even, relying on enterprise-grade security tools to protect your sensitive health data.
It is a fundamental paradigm shift. We're moving away from attackers trying to bypass the rules to attackers using the rules precisely as they were written. Just to their own advantage.
So true. And I want to start our exploration today by looking at the sheer scale of preparation happening in the shadows right now. We've got these reports from Checkpoint Research detailing how hackers are pre-positioning their infrastructure for major global events that are still months and months away. Specifically, the upcoming FIFA World Cup.
Right.
Checkpoint is warning that scammers are already heavily targeting the finance, travel, and gambling sectors.
Yeah, and the shift in time frame is really what we need to pay attention to here. Historically, we view cybercrime as this opportunistic endeavor, like a zero-day vulnerability drops and attackers just sprint to exploit it before the patch is applied.
Right, it's a race.
Exactly. But mega events like the World Cup, they create a totally different dynamic.
Yeah.
You have an immense financial ecosystem that just spins up out of nowhere. There are surging transaction volumes, millions of unfamiliar international merchants, compressed purchasing windows, and massive cross-border money flows.
I've got to push back on this a little bit because setting up a few fake domains with words like, FIFA or tickets in the URL is incredibly cheap and easy. So is this actually a sophisticated threat we need to worry about? Or is it just like low-level script kiddies making a bunch of noise hoping you click a bad link?
Well, it's much more than just registering cheap domains. They are building vast interconnected infrastructures. We're talking about fully functional fake hotel booking platforms.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, counterfeit merchandise vendors with integrated payment gateways, secondary ticketing markets. And they're doing this so early because they need to age these domains. Right. They need search engine algorithms to index them. They want to build up SEO authority so that by the time you search cheap World Cup hotel 6 months from now, the malicious site sits right on the first page of the search results, looking incredibly legitimate.
Okay, so they're gaming the SEO algorithms months in advance to build this illusion of authority. And Checkpoint also noted that we're already seeing shady, completely anonymous cryptocurrency tokens circulating that falsely claim to be officially affiliated with FIFA.
Yeah, they're definitely doing that too.
But here's the detail that actually stunned me. The legitimate businesses, like the official global partners of the event, are inadvertently leaving the door wide open for these scams. According to the report, a third of legitimate World Cup business partners lack sufficient DMR enforcement.
Yes. DMRC, domain-based message authentication, reporting, and conformance. It's the foundational email authentication protocol. It allows an organization to cryptographically prove that an email actually came from their domain.
Right, so it stops spoofing.
Effectively stopping email spoofing. Exactly.
So if it's foundational, why are a third of global multi-billion-dollar partners failing to enforce it? Is it just negligence?
It rarely comes down to simple negligence at that scale. Enforcing DMARC across a massive enterprise is notoriously difficult because of third-party vendors.
Oh, like marketing tools and stuff.
Exactly. Think about a global brand. Their IT department isn't the only entity sending email on their behalf. You have the marketing department using external platforms like MailChimp or Salesforce. You have customer support using Zendesk. You've got legacy HR systems sending automated alerts.
That's a lot of senders.
It is. And if IT strictly enforces DMARC without perfectly mapping every single one of those just third-party senders, they'll accidentally block their own legitimate business operations. So, to avoid breaking things, they just leave DMR in a monitoring state rather than an enforcement state.
But the consequence of leaving it in monitoring mode is massive.
Hmm.
It means my email provider looks at an incoming message, says, yep, looks like it's from the official World Cup sponsor, and drops a highly sophisticated phishing email right into my primary inbox.
Precisely.
You're relying on the brand's reputation, but the brand hasn't secured its own digital borders. And, this strategy of long-term pre-positioning isn't just restricted to sporting events. Check Point spotted the exact same tactic being applied to the upcoming U.S. midterm elections.
Right, that's another massive event on the horizon. Check Point observed over 5,000 election-themed domains registered since January alone, with these massive spikes in the spring.
5,000.
Over 5,000, yeah. And these domains lean heavily on words like election, vote, or ballot.
So if they aren't hacking voting machines, which we know is incredibly difficult and highly monitored,
Yeah.
those thousands of domains must be for credential harvesting, right? Like phishing for the passwords of campaign staffers or journalists.
That is certainly a component, but the primary goal is actually psychological. It's vital to look at the objective of the nation-state actors behind this. Check Point specifically highlighted a Russian operation known as Doppelganger, and their objective is to run large-scale disinformation campaigns. They want to convince everyday voters that truth itself is difficult, if not entirely impossible, to verify.
And just to be clear for everyone listening, because we're looking at this purely from a threat intelligence perspective, based on the source material, this operation is entirely agnostic of political sides. They aren't just targeting one end of the political spectrum. We're not endorsing any viewpoints here, just reporting what the attackers are doing.
Exactly. The researchers note that they clone high-authority news sites across the entire political landscape. They'll create domains that look nearly identical to Reuters, Fox News, or The Washington Post. And when I say clone, I mean perfect replication.
Like visually identical.
Visually identical.
Yeah.
They copy the CSS, the fonts, the layout, the logos, and then they publish completely fabricated news articles on these cloned sites.
Wow. So an everyday person, regardless of their political affiliation, sees a link on their social media feed, clicks it, sees the familiar fonts and colors of a trusted news brand, and just absorbs the disinformation. It's essentially a digital counterfeit operation, but instead of counterfeiting money, they're counterfeiting reality.
That's a great way to put it. And they hope that legitimate, smaller news outlets might accidentally pick up the story and distribute it further before realizing it's a fabrication. The motivation here is just chaos and the erosion of trust in shared information.
Okay, so setting up fake websites, even highly convincing cloned ones, is one thing. You're essentially creating a highly polished illusion. But what happens when attackers stop building fakes and instead decide to hijack the legitimate infrastructure we rely on every single day?
That's where things get really complicated.
Because if an attacker successfully steals a user's credentials or credit card data, they have to extract it somehow, right? And that brings us to the SandSec discovery in our sources today. This one genuinely blew my mind.
Yeah, you're referring to the campaign-compromising Magento and Adobe Commerce online store websites. This is perhaps the ultimate weaponization of trust we've seen recently.
So cybersecurity researchers at SandSec found attackers using Google Tag Manager and Stripe to steal credit card data. And the mechanism they're using is brilliantly deceptive. Let's break down the attack chain.
Okay, first we have to look at Google Tag Manager, or GTM. For anyone who manages a website, GTM is a standard, universally trusted tool.
Right, everyone uses it.
Exactly. It allows marketing and analytics teams to easily deploy tracking scripts without needing to modify the website's core code. And because it's used by millions of websites, security filters and content security policies just treat traffic flowing from the domain googletagmanager.com as inherently safe.
It's just allow listed almost everywhere by default.
Yep. So if you're a security tool monitoring network traffic and you see a website talking to a Google domain, you just wave it through. It's Google doing Google things.
So what do the attackers do?
Well, they managed to compromise the back end of a Magento store and inject a malicious GTM container into the site's code. When you, the shopper, arrive at the checkout page, your browser dutifully loads the GTM code straight from Google's servers.
Okay, but it's malicious.
Right. But here's the twist. That GTM code doesn't execute the malware directly. Instead, it makes a request to Stripe's API.
Wait, Stripe. Like, One of the biggest payment processors on the planet.
That's the one.
If I'm on a checkout page, seeing my browser communicate with Stripe is literally the most normal thing that could possibly happen.
It's exactly what a network defender expects to see, but instead of processing a payment, that API request retrieves a specific Stripe customer record that their attackers created beforehand on their own Stripe account.
Okay.
And hidden inside the text fields of that customer record isn't a name or a billing address. It's chunks of malicious JavaScript.
Wait, seriously? They're using Stripe's official database as a literal storage locker for malware. That is incredible. It's like a bank robber using the bank's own armored car and security guards to carry the stolen money out the front door.
That is exactly what's happening. The shopper's browser downloads these chunks of text from Stripe, reassembles them, and suddenly you have a working malicious script running locally in your browser. This script is a digital skimmer.
So it's watching what I type.
Yeah, it quietly watches the document object model, the structure of the checkout page. The moment the shopper types in their credit card number, CVV, name, and address, the skimmer copies it all.
But stealing the data locally in the browser is only half the battle, right? They still had to get that stolen data out of my browser and back to their own servers. And usually, exfiltrating data to some sketchy unknown IP address in another country is what finally triggers the data loss prevention alarms.
Which is where the attackers show their true ingenuity here. The malware takes all that stolen credit card data and applies what's called XOR obfuscation.
XOR. I've heard the term XOR thrown around in cryptography contexts, but how does it actually function in a browser skimmer? Like, are they just hashing the credit card number?
No, it's not a hash. Because a hash is a one-way function. You can't reverse it to get the credit card number back. XOR, which stands for exclusive OR, is a bitwise operation.
Okay, too bad.
So the malware takes the binary data of the credit card number and compares it against a secret cryptographic key provided by the attacker. If the bits match, it outputs a 0. If they differ, it outputs a 1.
Oh, I see.
The result is that a recognizable 16-digit credit card number is instantly turned into a completely meaningless string of alphanumeric gibberish. Security filters scanning outbound traffic for credit card patterns, they see nothing but noise.
Okay, so the data is completely scrambled and hidden, but where do they send it?
They send it right back to Stripe.
You're kidding.
No, the malware takes that XOR obfuscated data, creates a fake Stripe customer in the background, attaches the stolen data to that fake profile's metadata fields, and uploads it using the official api.stripe.com endpoint.
That is absolutely terrifying. If I'm an IT guy analyzing the logs, all I see is a trusted Google domain loading a script and then legitimate encrypted communication with a trusted Stripe payment domain. There are no weird, newly registered domains, no suspicious IP addresses. The entire attack chain lives inside the infrastructure of the Internet's most trusted platforms. How on earth is an enterprise supposed to defend against this?
Well, it requires a fundamental shift in how organizations secure their front end. The attackers successfully bypassed the store's content security policy specifically because those policies explicitly allow Stripe traffic.
Right, you have to allow the payment processor.
Exactly. So defending against this requires behavioral analysis within the browser itself. You have to monitor what the scripts are actually doing with the data entered into the form fields, rather than just checking if the domain you're talking to is on a trusted list. It proves that perimeter defenses based purely on domain reputation are failing.
Which brings us to the natural next step in the threat lifecycle. Because if attackers can successfully steal credentials and data by hiding inside trusted web traffic, their next move is often to take those stolen credentials and attack the corporate perimeter itself.
Yes.
But looking at the recent news, attackers haven't even needed stolen credentials lately. They're just finding critical flaws in the armor designed to keep them out.
Yeah, we're talking about the exploitation of enterprise virtual private networks, VPN.
Right. Rapid7 recently observed active exploitation of a massive flaw in Palo Alto's VPNs. We're looking at CVE 2026-0257. This is a vulnerability in PAN-OS, the operating system that powers Palo Alto's firewalls. And this isn't just a minor glitch. It was given a severity score of 9.1 out of 10.
Yeah, a CBSS score of 9.1 indicates a critical vulnerability. It generally means the flaw is easily exploitable over a network, requires low complexity, and crucially, requires no user interaction or privileges.
Wow.
In this specific case, it's an authentication bypass vulnerability in the Global Protect portal and gateway.
I want to make sure we understand the mechanism here, because an authentication bypass isn't just like guessing a password, right? It's more like having a state-of-the-art retinal scanner on the front door of a highly secure facility. But someone figured out that if you just unplug the scanner from the wall, the door defaults to open.
That's a great way to conceptualize it. Authentication typically involves a challenge and a response to generate a secure session token. But this vulnerability involves manipulating the session ID or the cryptographic validation process within the portal itself.
So they just skip the challenge.
Exactly. By sending a specifically crafted request, the attacker tricks the gateway into believing that a valid, authenticated session already exists. They bypass the challenge entirely and establish an unauthorized VPN connection directly into the internal corporate network.
And what makes this so pressing is the timeline. I mean, this moved from a theoretical vulnerability to active exploitation in the wild incredibly fast. Rapid7 saw attackers successfully leveraging this bug starting in mid-May.
Right.
And the situation became so severe that CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, stepped in and added it to their known exploited vulnerabilities catalog.
Right, the KV catalog. That is essentially the federal government's fix this immediately or disconnect it list.
Pretty serious.
Very. When a vulnerability hits the KV catalog, it triggers a strict mandatory deadline for federal agencies to patch their affected systems. And the range of affected versions for this Palo Alto flaw was extremely broad, spanning PanOS versions from 10.2 all the way up to 12.1.
That's a huge window.
It is a nightmare scenario for an IT team, because the very device you purchase to protect your perimeter becomes the exact mechanism of your breach.
And we know exactly what happens when those perimeters fail. The human cost of these intrusions is massive. I want to look at the recent DentaQuest incident from our sources. So DentaQuest is a massive dental benefits administrator, a subsidiary of Sun Life. And they were breached by a notorious ransomware group known as ShinyHunters.
Yeah, ShinyHunters operates within the upper echelons of the cyber extortion economy. Their typical playbook is double extortion.
Double extortion.
Yeah, they breach the network, map the infrastructure, steal the most sensitive data they can find, and then deploy ransomware to encrypt the victim's systems. So they demand payment for the decryption key and a second payment for a promise not to leak the stolen data on the dark web.
Wow. But at the DentaQuest case, the negotiations broke down. The ransom wasn't paid or an agreement couldn't be reached. So ShinyHunters took 234 gigabytes of DentaQuest data and just dumped it publicly on a dark web forum. The data breach monitoring site, Have I Been Pwned, analyzed the leak and confirmed that 2.6 million individual accounts were exposed.
And we really have to look at the nature of the data stolen, because health-related data is uniquely damaging. We aren't just talking about a dumped list of email addresses and hashed passwords.
No, not at all.
This leak included full names, phone numbers, government-issued IDs, health insurance information, gender, and dates of birth.
It's a kind of immutable data you just can't change. I mean, if your credit card is stolen in a strike-skimming attack, you call the bank, cancel the card, and get a new one in 3 days.
Right.
You cannot call the government and ask for a new date of birth or a new medical history.
Exactly.
But there was a striking detail in the analysis of this specific breach. When researchers ran the numbers, approximately 2/3 of those exposed records from DentaQuest were already sitting in the Have I Been Pwned database from previous, completely unrelated security incidents.
Yeah, that statistic really highlights the compounding effect of modern data breaches. When initial access brokers or threat actors acquire a new database like the DentaQuest leak, they don't just look at it in isolation.
They mix it with other stuff.
Right. They use automated tools to cross-reference it with the billions of records already floating around underground forums. They stitch together a comprehensive mosaic of a person's digital and physical life. They pull your medical history from one breach, your financial habits from another, and your legacy passwords from a third.
Which brings up a systemic issue I've been wrestling with while looking through all this material. If 2/3 of the DentaQuest victims were already exposed elsewhere, have we reached a point of absolute breach fatigue?
I think we might have, yeah.
Like the general public seems to just assume their data is permanently out there in the wild. And if we, as an industry, accept that reality, does it fundamentally change how we build security systems? Because telling people to use a stronger password feels pretty inadequate when their entire identity dossier is already public.
Breach fatigue is a very real psychological and systemic phenomenon. When every week brings news of another multi-million user data leak, the natural human response is apathy. But, accepting that data is compromised doesn't mean giving up. It means the industry is being forced to change its defensive posture.
How so?
We're realizing that static identifiers, like a social security number or a date of birth, can no longer be used as authenticators. You can no longer prove you are who you say you are just by reciting a number that was leaked 5 years ago.
That makes total sense.
So we have to move toward dynamic verification, behavior analytics, hardware-bound passkeys, and multi-factor authentication that actually resists phishing. We have to stop relying on the secrecy of data and start relying on the context of the user's actions.
Because, as we've explored today, the common thread running through all these stories is the absolute fragility of trust. We started by looking at how scammers are building vast, highly convincing infrastructures for the upcoming FIFA World Cup and the U.S. midterm elections, taking advantage of our reliance on search engine authority and official-looking domains, especially when the real partners struggle to enforce basic things like DRR.
Exactly. Then we saw how that deception evolves into the literal weaponization of the platforms we trust implicitly. The Sansec discovery, where hackers used Google Tag Manager to deploy malware and Stripe's official API to secretly exfiltrate XOR-obfuscated credit card data, is just a masterclass in hiding in plain sight. They bypass network defenses by routing their theft through the very tools designed to facilitate safe e-commerce.
And finally, we looked at the failure of the enterprise perimeter itself. The Palo Alto VPN vulnerability allowed attackers to unplug the authentication scanner entirely, leading to the kind of devastating, compounding data exfiltration we saw with the DentaQuest breach. Attackers are constantly, relentlessly finding ways to subvert the rules and systems we rely on.
It is a sobering reality, but it is crucial to remember that while you, the listener, cannot personally patch a federal agency's firewall, enforce DMRC for a global brand, or rewrite an online store's content security policy, you are not powerless in this landscape.
Not at all.
You have absolute control over your own awareness. You can critically evaluate the sources of your news. You can pause and scrutinize the context of a digital interaction. And you can freeze your credit to mitigate the fallout of immutable data leaks.
And that leaves us with a lingering question for you to ponder. If attackers are now successfully using our own trusted platforms like Google, Stripe, and enterprise-grade VPNs as their primary weapons against us, are we approaching a future where zero trust isn't just a network architecture buzzword for IT departments, but the required everyday psychological state for every single one of us when we open a browser? Think about that the next time you hit checkout or read a headline. Thank you so much for tuning into Calm Coding this week. Stay safe out there.